Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Aloha, everyone, and welcome to Aquarium Radio on aquariumradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kara Lessin, with my co-host, Karen Christine Patrick, who's coming to us from New Mexico, and I, Janet, I'm in Maui, Hawaii. And we are interviewing the incredible David M. Jacobs. And I will tell you a little bit about Dr. Jacobs before we bring on Karen and then bring on Dr. Jacobs. David Michael Jacobs is a retired professor of history at Temple University in Philadelphia. He has also been a UFO researcher since 1966. In 1973, he completed his doctoral dissertation in the field of intellectual history at the University of Wisconsin-Madison on the controversy over unidentified flying objects in America. This was the only second Ph.D. degree granted with a dissertation involving a UFO-related theme. Since then, there have been many others. He has written and delivered many articles, papers, and addresses on the subject of UFOs and abductions. He has been a consultant to the major UFO organizations. From 1977 to 2011, he taught the country's only regular curriculum university course on UFOs and abductions, called UFOs and American Society. Since the early 1980s, he has specialized in the UFO abduction phenomenon. He has investigated over 1,150 abductions with 150 individuals. He has lectured widely on the subject, both internationally and at colleges and universities across the United States. He delivered the first abduction phenomenon paper to a scientific organization at Cornell University in 1989. In 1992, he participated in the History of Science Society's first session on UFOs. In 2013, he was the first person to deliver a talk about UFO abductions at Oxford University. Since 1972, he has discussed UFOs and abductions on hundreds of radio, television, and internet shows, both nationally and internationally. And I have a much longer bio on aquariumradio.com. Dr. Jacobs worked with the late Bud Hopkins, and they did a lot of things like the Roper Organization poll of the abduction phenomenon. Karen, are you there?
I certainly am.
Hi.
I'm excited to talk to Dr. Jacobs today, first of all, very interesting when somebody approaches this from the academia side, especially in the early days when it was kind of a taboo subject. So I really admire his tenacity in doing that, and also just having a really long view of this topic. I'm really interested in, his many years study, probably come to some base conclusions that might not be noticeable by somebody who's just looked at it or just having it. Glad to have you. Dr. Jacobs is very exciting.
Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you here. Thank you for coming on our show. You and I had a discussion, of course, got interrupted because you're very popular there and everybody's around you, but at the International UFO Congress, we tried to have a discussion about your presentation there, and it was very, very interesting and very controversial. So where would you like to begin? I'm going to kind of wind you up and let you go for a while so you can explain to our listeners more about who you are, your research, and some of your conclusions. Take it away.
Thank you. I started doing research into UFOs back in I got interested in UFOs in 1965, and in 1966 I started doing field work for UFO organizations, 66 through 69 or so. And I didn't really get interested in the abduction phenomenon until 20 years later, in 1982, when I first met Bud Hopkins, and then under his tutelage, I sort of watched what he was doing, learned about hypnosis and all that, and starting in 1986, I started doing my own regression sessions with abductees, and I've sort of been doing that ever since. I've written 3 books on the abduction phenomenon: Secret Life, which came out in 1992, The Threat, which came out in 1998, and then Walking Among Us, which came out last September. And what you see in the 3 books is an arc of what this phenomenon is, how it works, what it's here for. The whys are tough, but I think that we have enough information about what's going on to make guesses. So what I saw was years ago when I first began this, people were reporting lying on tables, having procedures administered to them, men having sperm taken, women having eggs taken, women saying that they were being implanted with an embryo afterwards in some way, and then the fetus would be removed, let's just say 10 weeks or so later. This was all sort of standard stuff that I began to hear. Some people talked about gray aliens who were there. Others talked about gray aliens and some other beings who looked sort of human. Others talked about gray aliens and other beings who looked human, and also ones who looked like insects, like praying mantises in large part. And yet there were some who talked about all those things and also talked about ones who looked more reptilian than anything else. So it was a sort of a collection of different beings all on board UFOs, all together, and all basically doing the same thing in one way or another. What all that meant escaped me. It was impossible to tell what it all meant. In the threat, I concentrated more on the ones who looked more human, which my colleague Bud Hopkins called, actually you can say which or who, I'm not sure what would apply, who my colleague Bud Hopkins called hybrids. I mean, with a hybrid, you're never sure if it was human, whether it be a who or a which would be maybe human. And in the latest book, I've talked about how these hybrids have developed to a point where they are absolutely, completely human in every conceivable way imaginable, except one way, which is neurologically their brain functions differently. And how they are moving into the society with the help of abductees. So when I look back on it, even the material that I was looking at back in the 1980s, which led to Secret Life in 1992, all of it points actually in the same direction. There isn't anything that points away from it or stuff that's so bizarre you can't even get a grip on it. You can't grasp what they're saying or doing. Nothing like that has happened. Everything is logical, rational. This is a program that is goal-directed. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. And these beings know what they're doing, so to speak. So I guess that's sort of what my life has been like for the past half century almost.
Wow. Karen, do you have any questions or feedback?
Yeah, my question would be on doing regressions. Is that something that you're kind of continually doing or still doing today, or did you have a set period of time that you did it with an outline towards an understanding of it, like a study? I was just wondering what your reference point was on that.
Yeah, I did an enormous amount of abduction research with regressions, obviously. All of my information comes out of hypnotic regression. Now, everybody obviously has to understand that what you're dealing with here is human memory, which is faulty at best, recovered through hypnosis with all its problems, administered by amateurs such as myself. So you can't get a weaker form of evidence than that, it seems to me. It's unbelievably weak on the surface. The problem is that it's more than just the surface, if I may go off in a slightly different direction.
Yeah.
People, when they're abducted, they're physically missing from their normal environments. They're not, as one person told me many, many, many years ago, that she was abducted and she was on her couch the whole time, and she went to Venus or something like that. Actually, that's what it was, and in this abduction. But when she came back, she could still see her shape on the couch. She was still on the couch, and she called that an abduction. Well, that is not an abduction. That's something that's something that's brain function. It's not an abduction. People are physically missing from the normal environment. In other words, the police have been called, search parties have been sent out, parents have frantically searched for their children have frantically searched for their parents, and then suddenly they're returned. People see other people being abducted and may or may not be abducted themselves. People are abducted in groups and can confirm each other's abductions. Every once in a while, people see each other at random on the street and will recognize each other as being on board a UFO with each other. It's rare, but it does happen every once in a while. When people return from abductions, they return with marks and fully formed scars. I'm saying something right now that is not possible. It's even less possible than the abduction phenomenon. Fully formed scar tissue that wasn't there the day before. This is not biologically possible, and yet I have seen it. And I must say that when I did see it, my jaw hit the floor. But
so let me stop you right there. So you're saying, so this was a client of yours, and you knew that he didn't have scars. You saw the before and after. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I had a session with her the day before, and then I said goodbye to her and toodaloo and so long and nice knowing you and goodbye. And then my wife didn't like to go shopping, so I went to the market the next morning, and I was pushing a cart around an aisle, and there she was. And I said, Janice, so what are you doing here? To my amazement, And she said, well, I called your wife, and she told me where you were, and I wanted you to see something. And I said, okay. And she said, look at this. And she had a 1-inch scar between her thumb and her forefinger on her right hand that was not there before. And I was looking at a fully healed scar.
Okay,
then she said, look at this.
Okay,
then she said, look at this. She said, look at this. And then she showed me her left hand, and there was a 1-inch scar between her thumb and her forefinger that was not there the day before. She had them on both hands, the same length, both scar tissue. And I'd seen her the day before. There wasn't anything on her hands.
So, scar indicates time. Some kind of movement of time has happened between wound and healing. Or what else?
Well, this is only overnight.
Did you have this? Right. So, did she perhaps go through some kind of time travel?
No.
What would be an explanation for a scar and the wound healing with, well, was there a wound there in the first place? I guess so. That's why we get scar tissue. So what's your explanation for that?
Right. Yeah. there's only one explanation. What we are dealing with is an extremely highly advanced technological civilization. And the technology involves not only rockets or whatever they use to get here. However they get here, they have to be very advanced. And I can give you a whole argument why that is true if you want. But they're also neurologically advanced to a degree that is almost incomprehensible to us. And so most of the procedures that they do to people are also advanced. And they figured out a way how to form scar tissue right away. To me, it's astounding and amazing, but at the same time, I can understand that these beings are very, very advanced in all areas. Mm-hmm. So, but how they do that, I have no idea. In fact, we don't know anything at all about their technology in any way other than what they can do with it. In other words, we don't know the exact ways in which they can fly, so to speak. We don't know how they got here. We don't know. And when people are lying on tables, procedures done to them, we have no idea what the procedures are. And we've heard hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases of these procedures, basically all the same. And when it comes to instruments or machines placed over them or whatever it is, we don't have a clue. Now, obviously, if this were psychological, people would just tell us what they were doing, because if they're making it up in their own minds, they would make up whatever it is that they think they're doing. Well, they're X-raying me. They're testing my this or my heart or my that or whatever. And but actually, abductees don't know it. Therefore, we don't know it, and these beings don't say what they're doing. So therefore, there's no train of evidence other than what abductees describe. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's more than just memory. And finally, the other thing I wanted to mention was when people return from an abduction event, they sometimes return with their clothes on inside out. They sometimes. What's that?
Right, and they sometimes return with the wrong clothes. We have one.
They sometimes return with somebody else's clothes. That's exactly right. And that doesn't happen a whole lot, but it happens enough times so that we know that it will occur. It's just a mistake on these beings' part. So there is this physicality to it, in other words, and there are people who are not abducted who will see an abduction every once in a while. It's rare, but it does happen. And you've got this business about scars. I've known people who've had scars as long as 7 inches on their body, and they have no idea how they got them, which is simply not possible. That's just not possible. If you were too young to know how you got that scar, your parents would know how they got that scar, because it would be an amazing trauma for them. Their child has been cut, and all that. They would remember it. And most people who have scars on their bodies know exactly how they got every scar. It's just part of their lives. So, but with abductees, when they have scars in the back of their knees or on their back or on their arm or whatever it is, they don't know how they got the scars. They have no idea, which, of course, is nonsensical.
Right.
So there's a whole world of abductions that's all conformed to each other that would be unknown to other abductees. They wouldn't know that they're supposed to say this and not supposed to say that, and if they're faking it in some way. So this propels me forward, and other people who do abduction research, that there's a physicality to it, that this is not just being dreamed up for no reason whatsoever. Obviously, somebody's not taking a knife and sticking it in their back and digging a long ditch in their back, or something like that.
Right.
That's not happening.
Well, I'm an abductee, and I call myself an experiencer, but I came back with a large... I think it dissipated, although it's on my back, so I really don't know. It went from my right buttocks all the way up to my left shoulder, like V-shaped scratch mark. Another time, I came back with a puncture. Kind of got, somebody just took a round thing and punctured me right between the shoulder blades, like that part you can't reach it, whether you come from the below or up. And I was trying to reach it again. There's something there. My husband says, "Oh my God, look at this." So my husband was a very, straight, conventional, normal, person, and here his wife is having all this stuff happen. So he didn't know what to make of it. He never quite believed it. But I had to. So you were saying earlier that, you don't know what it's about sometimes, and there's these procedures. My procedures, I just happened to be going through infertility procedures during the time I was in my second marriage. We were trying to have a baby. And I was taking my temperature every night. And I knew when they were coming based on when my temperature dropped and when my eggs were, when I was ovulating. They were coming like clockwork. And so they knew, and I knew. And that's back in the late 80s, early 90s. So the whole field wasn't real polluted like it is now. So I'm sitting there figure out something. But I did write to you.
You did.
I think I wrote to you. I think when I was still with my first husband. What year was your first book?
It was 1992.
92. No, so this must have been with the second husband. So I wrote to you, and you wrote back to me. Thank you very much, because I had no resources except I was in a spiritual community in State College, where Penn State University is, and they were starting to discuss it. And we began the Penn State UFO discussion group, and we were just talking about. And I had people coming up saying that they had encounters, and one young man had fought. He knew it was being taken. And have you ever had stories of people fighting them? He said, he was very angry, and so he fought them. He told us he actually ended up kind of like breaking through and actually kicking one or something. So, yeah, anyway.
That will happen every once in a while. Somebody can get a kick in. I had one guy reach up and grab a gray alien by the neck while he was lying down, and I've had people punch them and do things like that. These the gray aliens are usually the butt of all this. They don't appreciate it. Mm-hmm. So they admonish the abductee not to do that. That was not good. That was bad. You're not to do that. And they usually bring the abductee under control very quickly, and so they can't do it again.
What are they using to bring them under control? Their minds?
There are two ways. The first way is, the mind. Neurologically, they can control humans, and humans cannot control them. That's how it works. Without that neurological control, there would be no abduction phenomenon. Mm-hmm. If a person is on board and breaks loose and runs down the hallway and manages to club a gray alien over the head or something like that, they then bring that person under control, and they will then strap down in some way their arms when they lay them on the table, or even their legs if they're kicking, and then bring them under control even more. So those are the two main ways. But these are living sentient beings. They are unbelievably good at what they do, but they are not perfect. And that's why every once in a while somebody can get loose and run down the hallway as if there's a place to go, which there isn't, of course. And they make other mistakes as well, but they're low-level mistakes. They're not major mistakes. In other words, a UFO has not crashed into the Empire State Building yet by accident, just bad driving or something like that.
Right.
So that would be a major mistake, to say the least. So, but this is now I I've given a bunch of interviews, primarily because of this book, Walking Among Us, and there are in this book I talk about the three pillars of the abduction phenomenon, and these are things that sort of shape the phenomenon.
Okay.
Number one, it's intergenerational. That is to say, if a person is an abductee, their mother or their father, or both sometimes, was an abductee, that person's children will be abductees as well, and their children will be abductees, and then their children will be abductees, and so forth. We don't know how long this will go on or when it started, but although there's indication that it started probably in the last quarter of the 19th century or the first quarter of the 20th century. And so it's intergenerational. Now, what that means is that it keeps up with the growth of population. So as the population expands, the number of abductees expand as well, which has a lot of different meanings for it. I mean, it provides for more hybrids, which we can talk about later, and it provides for it gives sustenance, so to speak, to the program that's going on, as you can see, as you'll see later on when we talk more about it. Number two, it's global. This is not an American phenomenon. This is not something that Americans conjured up in the United States. That is not the way it works. It is a global phenomenon. I have worked with people from, and my colleague Bud Hopkins, who died in 2011. We worked with people from Asia and Africa and Europe and Latin America and all around the world. And they all say the same thing. It does not matter who they are or what their level of education is or what their intelligence level is or anything at all. Nothing matters. They all say the same thing around the world. They all describe the same aliens, all describe the similar procedures and everything else. There has never been, even just with that one aspect, there's never been anything like this in human history. All saying the same thing about something that is totally, completely insane for the surrounding society, all saying it in the same procedure, with the same procedures, the same beings, the same this, the same that, same everything, and all of them knowing that it's crazy to say something like that out loud, and yet they do it. And the third thing is that it is clandestine. It is secretive. And in the thread, I had a long section on secrecy and why there's secrecy, and the reasons for secrecy and this and that. But for Walking Among Us, I boiled it down to one sentence, an irrefutable sentence, a satisfying sentence. And the sentence is, they don't want us to know what they're doing.
Right. Now, number one was intergenerational. Number two.
Global.
Global. Okay, global. Okay, so I'm a person. I'm trying to figure this out. I'm reading your book. Yes, it's intergenerational. My grandmother, two months before she died, gathers the grandchildren to tell us. And I don't know if she told her husband, but she told, and I don't remember which one of my cousins were at the table with me. It was not my brother or sister. I already asked them. And she told us. Now, my point there is not everybody's going to talk about it. It could have been more people in my family. They never talked about it. But I was the youngest of three. Go ahead.
Yes, but here's the problem. Because it's clandestine, one of the aspects of being secretive is to keep the knowledge from the abductee, his or herself. And and that's why people will remember bits and pieces of things over the years, and might try to figure it out, whereas other people don't even remember bits and pieces of things, and they just they have odd lives, but they think that's just sort of normal life. This oddities of being in one place at one time, and then suddenly it's 2 hours later and they're in another place, and they think, well, that's just the way life is. And they make up some sort of a rationale for it, so they can just sort of get through the day and all that. But you're not supposed to remember it. So the vast majority of abductees, God knows what the percentage is, it might be as high as 95%, don't know that they're abductees, don't have a clue.
And then, have you discovered what makes the ones who remember?
No. It seems to be at random. It's a matter of brain chemistry. And I do not understand why some people remember. But once again, these beings are not perfect. So they can't make everybody forget everything. I would say, however, for the ones who do remember things happening to them, they probably don't remember more than 90% of the things, maybe 98% of the events that have happened to them over the years. In other words, I might do 10 sessions with a person, and we'll look at 10 different abduction events. Or let's just say I'll look at 100 different abduction events. There's one woman who I did that with, but 100 is nothing. How's that for something odd? For a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, they'll have 10 or 15 or 20 abductions a year or more. Now, if you have 20 abductions a year, only 10 years, that's 200 already. And if it's been for the past 40 years, you see what I mean? It adds up. It becomes crazy. It becomes absolutely insane. And yet, that is the absolute truth of the situation. Most people, I used to use 5 abductions a year to show how crazy this thing was in terms of how many events people have. But most abductees would give their right arms to have only 5 abductions a year. Some have 5 abductions a week.
Think of it. If you had a rat in a lab, I mean, how many times would that lab rat get picked up in the course of its, experiments, right? So if we're one of their subjects in this ongoing experiment, of course they're going to check on us all the time to see what's going on. And I have been a contactee experiencer all my life, and I know it's been, I'm 62 years old. Do the math. It's amazing how many times. And I was lucky to marry my therapist, and we, he was sophisticated enough to realize that there was something going on and not dismiss it. Together almost 20 years. So we've been talking about this, and I will say I remember this episode and that episode, and I've had, I don't even remember how many times I've regressed, but I usually go into episodes where I had some kind of like a initial remembrance, there was a screen memory or something, and let's go talk about
absolutely.
And do a session.
Yeah.
Imagine the ones that I haven't had, did not have the screen memory. We haven't looked at, those types of things.
Well, most people don't even have screen memories or distorted bleed-through memories or anything like that. Most people don't know anything at all. We surmise. There's reasons to how this can be surmised, but it is possible that Hopkins and I did a national survey through the Roper organization back in 1991. And this was if you can imagine this, they don't have this anymore. This was a clipboard in hand kind of poll taken of 5,985 or whatever it was, almost 6,000 people across the country in 3 2,000-person sweeps. And when we got the numbers, and I wrote about this in the thread, the numbers were so high in terms of who might be an abductee that we knew 2 things. Number 1, they were too high to go forward with them. Number 2, there was probably something wrong with the poll. So we cooked the numbers down. We had 10 questions that could be asked. one of the questions was a word that Bud Hopkins invented called, and the question was, does the word Trondant have special meaning for you? Anybody who said yes to that was dropped from the poll because it was a made-up word. Except only recently I was looking through a dictionary of medieval English, and there was the word Trondant. It was actually a word unbeknownst to either of us.
What does it mean?
I don't remember what it meant, actually, to tell you the truth. But it was used in the 13th century or whatever. So anyway, and then we took the 10 questions, and we said that 5 of them were going to be lower indicator questions and 5 were higher indicator questions. And then people had to answer yes to 4 or 5. No, to at least 4 of the higher indicator questions. On the high, that's it. They had to answer at least. So it was possible for a person to answer yes to 8 out of the 10 questions and not make the poll. And when we did that, we cut the numbers down to 2%. 2% of 300 million people is 6 million abductees. And when we came out with 2%, that literally made national news. And every once in a while, I'll still hear it somewhere in the news. 6 million people are abductees and all that. But in fact, the number is actually higher than that. Our best guess was, and it certainly is my best guess, that it's higher than that. It could be 5% or even more. And when you're dealing with 5%, you're dealing with 15 million Americans. And this is a global phenomenon. And there's 7.4 billion people on Earth right now, 7.4 billion. Now, at 2%, I mean, it's still you're dealing with 300 million people, 350 million, whatever it is, and I mean, there's an enormous amount of abductees in the world.
So that's what Karen, you're there. We both are associated with FREE. The Edgar Mitchell. What does it stand for? Foundation, Karen. Foundation for what?
Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, and they've been working steadily on a study. So it is a self-selected. If you select yourself to go through the questions. I think they're on stage 2 or stage 3, something like that. But they're working deeper and deeper into the phenomenon. And, one thing was how many people, like you said, had the multiple experiences, not just, one experience, but multiple experiences. And then the other thing is kind of getting into people's interpretations or feelings about their experiences. So there's very detailed questions, and also what other paranormal things or psychic type things that people experience. But I'm just really fascinated. I was going to ask you about, how many people are being abducted or what percentage of the population, and it just sounds very, very high. What I wanted to ask was, some people have talked about that there was an agreement, and I know you said it's not a United States phenomenon, but there was an agreement between the Eisenhower administration that somehow we would receive clandestine technology in trade for abduction access to the human population. And I was wondering if you concur with that, or you had any information about that, or is that kind of a UFO urban myth?
That is a pure urban myth. There's absolutely no truth to that whatsoever. The aliens don't need to have permission or a situation to make it legal or a tit for tat, a quid pro quo. They don't need to have anything like that at all. Period. Not only that, but the abduction phenomenon has been going on. Bud Hopkins did a session with a guy who was a kid in the 1920s. This was many years ago, obviously, when he was abducted. I did sessions with 2 people who were kids in the 1930s who were abducted, and the 40s are filled with abductions and all the rest, But the fact is that if they had it in the 1920s, they might have had some sort of a deal with the Harding administration. You see what I mean? It makes no sense.
Well, I think that this whole thing, and we've looked at it a lot of times, and yes, it goes back many, way into the past, even before the turn of the last century, apparently. But we're just talking about, the Nazis had interactions. All these stories are coming out. We look at the whole field, right? All these stories are coming out, and then you go into the ancient aliens thing. So apparently there's been intervention or contact since the dawn of time, just looking at everything. You look at the whole field. Now this story
you got to be
the
careful. You have to be careful with all that stuff. I stick to what other people have told me, and I know that it's intergenerational. The question is, how many generations does it go back? And I also know that when the world did not have as huge a population growth as it's had in the 20th century, sometimes the population was relatively static. And I once had a Ph.D. mathematician work out if it's intergenerational, how many generations will it take for everybody on Earth to be an abductee? Because if the population stays the same for decades, then the kids are marrying non-abductees, which is 99% of the time the case, because most people are not abductees, then eventually everybody would be an abductee. And
that's
he
what
worked it out.
One person, I forget it was, said that everybody gets abducted, but they decide who they're going to continue the experiment on based on some kind of criteria, and it usually ends, by the time you're a teenager, if you're not selected for the program, that's a lifelong thing, and we don't know what the criteria is. And so, that's the story, but it was very interesting, and he had some kind of proof or evidence or whatever to substantiate what he was saying.
This is not what Hopkins and I found. What we found is that it's intergenerational, and it starts in early childhood, maybe even infancy, because parents are abducted with their children, and it continues on until old age, probably stops maybe in people's late 70s. That's the best I can do. But it is not selective. It's only selective intergenerationally. It's not, and they don't. Now, if somebody suddenly is blinded for some reason or another, that person will not be abducted again. And if somebody gets, has an awful physical problem and they're in a wheelchair, that person will not be abducted either. So there are breaks on it in certain with certain infirmities, but otherwise people are just abducted all the time. And there's no such thing as selection. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. Not in anything that I've ever found.
Right.
But the chances of it starting way back when are much less than you'd think. The chances of coming up to every major government in the world and asking for some sort of logical way that these aliens can abduct people without disrupting the society and yet give the society new technology and all that is just, it doesn't fly. It just, I know that people have said this for years, but the evidence for it is, it approaches zero. Let's put it that way. Unfortunately, but that's just me, and I've only been in it for a half a century.
Right. I have a person who says she's a hybrid, and she had her father, who was in the government, do a blood analysis, and he said that, she's a hybrid of this species and that species. And then on his deathbed, he told her that he too was a hybrid, and he was born around 1920 or something. So that's what I'm looking at. That we have these different people that are coming forth now. And they're talking about their multi-generational experiences, and it is going back further and further into time. But of course, let's be on those people are all dead now. So
yeah, well, that's the thing. We don't know when this began exactly.
Right.
But my guess is that if you count the 20th century as modern, it's basically a modern phenomenon. Now, in 1896, 1897, there was the airship wave. There was an airship wave, and people were seeing airships in the sky, and they were doing all sorts of maneuvers and this and that. And there were no airships in the United States in 1896. And there was only one in 1897, and it only flew for 1 mile once. The mystery airship wave might have been a UFO wave for all we know. There are no people around who now remember it, But so it might have started then. It might have started a little bit earlier. But at that point, you just become speculative, and the evidence just doesn't really. There's people don't write in their diaries about their abduction experiences, and we would be seeing that if it started in the 18th century or the 14th or the 16th century or something like that, when people wrote diaries all the time if they could write, then we would see bleed through memories. We would see pictures of little gray aliens. We'd see all that sort of stuff, and that simply does not appear anywhere as far as we know. Now, Jacques Vallée, who has been a UFO researcher for many years, takes issue with that, with what I just said, and he finds drawings and cave paintings and this and that, of what might be considered UFOs or aliens. But in tribal societies, you really never know what they're saying. There's nobody around to explain it to you. And when they looked up in the sky and saw things falling from the sky like meteors or whatever, who knows what went on in their minds? And we just can't tell. It's just it might be that old. But I really doubt it. The doubt is because of the intergenerational quality. We don't see that as many people as should be abductees now if it had started many, many, many hundreds of years ago. And the key thing here is that abductees marry non-abductees. That's the key.
Okay, so abductees don't marry abductees, you're finding?
No, because you're not going to, when people get married, they don't dig and delve to find out whether their spouse is an abductee or not. That's the farthest thing from their minds, even if they are abductees themselves, because most of the time they don't even know it.
Well, I'll just address the thing through time one more time, and then we'll go on to something else. We my husband and I do research going back through antiquity, and of course there's all kinds of evidence, quote unquote, in various places. So you have the anomalies around the planet. You have paintings that show obviously UFOs in there. There's stories of the battles. That were like in India. I forget what that book's called. Anyway, a number of the ancient books describe battles that seem to be extraterrestrial in nature. You look at the book of Ezekiel, that seems to be extraterrestrial. Now, that doesn't mean that they were doing their hybrid program at the time. There may have been contact, and we have to look at it objectively. What was the contact about? And maybe the hybrid program didn't start until something happened on the Earth or maybe on their home planet. What species are visiting? What species are doing the hybrid program? Have you uncovered their agenda? What is the purpose behind it? Is their planet in trouble? Is our planet in trouble? Is it a combination of the species being in trouble? What are your findings?
Right. Well, let me start by answering what you just said. And the answer to what you just said is that it is well within the realm of possibility that other beings have visited here and literally visited and stopped and picked up somebody and pulled his or her legs off and looked inside to see what makes them cook or whatever, and it's possible that could have happened. I can't say no, and that would certainly mean that there were ancient visitations, and they literally would be visiting, for a short time, and then off to another planet or whatever. The abduction phenomenon is not like that at all. The abduction phenomenon, all around the world, people describe the same beings, the same procedures, the same everything. It does not matter, as I've said before, what their station in life is or anything like that. And we do know that this abduction phenomenon has been going on, as I said, throughout most of the 20th century. I read a letter. I like to point this out because this is where you you sort of get the idea that it's happening even earlier. This is I did research in 1972 at the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization headquarters in Tucson, Arizona, which was Jim and Coral Lorenzen's organization, which at one time was one of the two largest UFO organizations in the country. And there was a letter in there which I like to quote, and it was a letter from a guy who said, I thought you might like to know what happened to me. And it was in 1917 when he was 11 years old. And I found this in their file cabinet. And he said that his parents had brought him to his grandparents' house on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it was. And he was bored with the grown-ups, and he went out into the back area. It was a farmhouse, essentially. And he walked into a stand of woods, and there in this wooded area was a large silver circular object on the ground. And there were little people who were standing next to it who were looking at him. So he immediately turned around and started running in a panic. And they ran after him, he said. And he ran back to the house, and he beat him back to the house. I thought you'd just like to know that, he said. That was it. And but when I read that letter, I had no idea what I was hearing. Now, in my dotage, I understand exactly what happened there. First of all, that UFO was there for a reason, and he suddenly found himself as being the object of that reason. Little guys don't run after 11-year-old kids. That's not going to happen. Once they looked at him and he was there, everything else was forgotten. And then when they let him go, he ran home. That's probably what happens. That almost certainly was an abduction. Now I can't prove it, of course, but that was 1917. So we know that these same beings have been there essentially for, or at least in the 20s and all that, for most of the 20th century. But are there other beings around who are coming down even now, and in some way looking at people? I don't know. I don't think so, to tell you the truth. The evidence for me doesn't add up, but it certainly is possible. If we are, let's put it this way: our technology is brand spanking new. It just happened, basically yesterday. Not even yesterday. Let's just say 1 second within yesterday, if that's a concept. And it's brand new. Most people who are into technology and all that say it's like 250 years old, which is no time at all in cosmic time. It's zero time. It does not make it up to being time even. 200 years. Let's just say it's 5,000 years old. Well, the same applies. It's still nothing. It's a tiny bit longer than 250 years, but not much in terms of cosmic or geologic time, where you're dealing with billions of years. So it doesn't, it doesn't add up at all. So therefore, the technology that we see has to be extremely advanced if they can get here from wherever they are, wherever they're from, and I don't know where. And everything else has to be, extremely, extremely, extremely advanced. So now the problem is I can't remember what the question was. That's the problem.
It doesn't matter. We're in a flow of consciousness, and we're just having a little fireside chat here with a couple million of our friends, whoever's listening to this, either live or in the archives later. You bring up a lot of good points. Mike, I was just thinking as you were talking and kind of getting lost in all this conversation because it's so, for me it's just incredibly fascinating because I've had a lot of these mysteries. Now, my grandmother, she would have been in her reproductive years in the 1920s or the 19-teens, because she was born in either the late 1890s to 1901. My mother was born in, her son was born in 1920, and that was her first son. So if she was one of their subjects, she might have been, from the previous century, the 1890s. No, she might have been getting her abduction around her menses. I guess they're starting when they start being. Well, they start in childhood, right? Yeah. So she probably was a contactee in the 1890s.
Yeah, I talked with Bud Hopkins and I were down at a conference in Birmingham, Alabama, many years ago, and I talked with 3 generations of abductees. There was the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. And the grandmother told me about her grandfather, and there were some funny stories around him. And one was that he found himself in a cave somewhere in a dark area, and he ran out of it, and he ran across the field, and he fell down, and he when he sort of went unconscious for a second or whatever it was. Then when he woke up, he was a giant bunny rabbit was staring into his eyes. Now that's typical abduction stuff. I've heard that many times.
They put that screen memory so you don't freak out. Yeah.
Well, it's not that. There's a whole the staring into your eyes business from a distance of touching foreheads or a couple of inches away is actually a procedure in which they're tapping into the optic nerve and then using the optic nerve to energize any other neural site in your brain. And so people will describe what's happening in their minds while these beings are doing that, and all sorts of different things are going on. But usually it's looking at what these people have been doing for the past couple of weeks since the last abduction or whatever it is. And so otherwise, staring into your eyes is such an odd concept, that for aliens to do. But it's been there with us for decades. In fact, I was actually the first person to uncover that, having no idea what it meant originally or how it worked or anything like that. But
so they stare into the eyes to read your biorecorder and tap into your memories of what you have been doing.
Right, exactly. That's a good way of putting
it.
Yeah, and now they can do other things too. They can also stimulate sexual response, and that's an egg-taking procedure. With women, they will stimulate sexual.
I'm a Tantra teacher, and now I'm a UFO researcher. But I started, 30 years ago, being a Tantra teacher. I studied it in depth, and they do that. You look into the eyes of your beloved, and you put your foreheads together, and you stare into your eyes until it becomes like one eye, and you look up, and then that's supposed to take you deeper into loving oneness. So there seems to be something there. You're looking deep, and the concept is, you can look deep into the other person's soul, and you can see all the way through consciousness up to the creation.
I don't think that. Yeah, I don't think that's in the abduction phenomenon. This is strictly to stimulate sexual response so they can take an egg. Why this sexual response allows them a greater facility at taking eggs, we don't know, because technically speaking, that should not happen with humans. But we don't know enough about it yet. However, all abductees report
the sexual response with the potential of the ovum being fertilized allows the release of the egg sometimes. So that's we find in my husband was a professor teaching about human sexuality, so I got some of this. He's the expert, but he's sleeping. So that might be, you said, it stimulates. It's a sexual response. So in Tantra, it's a sexual response. So they're doing the same thing. They're getting a sexual response, and they're getting the eggs to release. And it might not be the right time in their period of their cycle.
Whatever happens, it certainly facilitates their obtaining eggs. And a gynecologist will say that's not possible, but it is possible if you're from the planet Vortex or whatever.
Yes, the planet Vortex people. Well, actually, one of the things they wonder why so many people conceive during rapes. And it's so that's kind of a rape, right? And there is some kind of correlation that the body is not a conscious thing. It's an animal, so it responds on a basic primal level to some kind of advanced stimulation. So anyway, I'm not making any.
I guess
sense, but there is some way to bring the eggs to release without having to. But for me, they were coming when I was doing the medication to get them to release. When I was doing fertility drugs, I would have 5 or 6 eggs at a time. That's what happens when you do fertility drugs. And they were coming. I was charting this, and I go, oh, my God, I'm ovulated. They're going to be here tonight. And I would fight with them. I was okay with being taken, but I wanted to remember and stop with this unconscious stuff and tell me what's going on. I just remember being very obnoxious with them, and I would sometimes wake up and I'd say I felt like I was been hit by a Mack truck, and sometimes, my eyes would be almost glued shut because they had some kind of light in my eyes, and it's like, will you stop that? Because I have to go to work today, and they're going to look good, and I look like like I've been beat up or something. I didn't have any black blue, but my eyes were all swollen. So anyway, that was when I'm no longer reproducing, but when I was going through that, definitely there were a lot of indicators. But of course, who do you talk to, right? I couldn't even talk to my husband. Oh, honey, they're taking our eggs. Sorry, we're never going to have a child. And I never have been able to have a live birth. So thank you.
Well, it is unfortunate, and then again, there are a lot of abductees who also had difficulty conceiving, and then they do conceive, and they do have a kid. So, but I don't know what the difference is, and I'm sure there's a lot of other factors that are involved with something like that. But
one of the things they told me, they said, I'm not in the regular breeding program. I'm in it's a humanoid breeding program. And so they brought me, a lot of abductees to say they were showing their children. Mine, they said, was a mixture of my eggs and the DNA of some of my, if I had a partner, and they mixed whatever they are to enhance it. So they showed me, and they were very human-looking, but they were like enhanced humans, more beautiful, more like a god, like an angel. They were like enhanced, and they showed my son to me as an infant all the way to a young man. They said, "Here's your son." So, this is my son by my husband here. So I did have a child or two. I've shown 2 different children by 2 different men. But they said, "Here's your son. We're going to show you him all the way through all the times." Anyway, so I don't think that's happened with anybody else, but I woke up in a profound sense of peace and love and joy, and it's like, okay, I do have a son, and I told Sasha, honey, I saw our kid last night. Never saw him in this 3D reality walking up to me or, shaking hands, but who knows? That may happen yet. Who knows?
Well, for the people who I have worked with, and of course I haven't worked with everybody, but for the people who I have worked with who've had these procedures done, it's much more assembly line than anything else. It's just the procedures that they have to endure, and the embryo. The eggs are taken, sperm is taken, then, and I'm going to say this, although I don't know it for sure, but there's an alteration in the zygote, I guess, and perhaps alien DNA is added. And once again, I do not know whether aliens have DNA. They may not, for all we know. And after about 10 weeks or so, the fetus is removed, and that happens over and over and over and over and over and over again. And when a woman no longer has her monthly cycle, so to speak, there's still plenty of things to do to insert embryos from other. You can still insert an embryo. You can still after menopause, you can still insert an embryo into the lining of the uterus and so forth, and that happens with older women, and it's not unusual. But But what we're looking at here and what we're talking about is a breeding program. That's what we're talking about. This is, and that's what we've seen starting in the 1990s. We began to understand this was a breeding program, and it was breeding hybrids. Mm-hmm. And there is, different types of hybrids. There's ones who look really, really alien. Now, when I say alien, I'm talking gray alien, because as far as I'm concerned, there's a good evidence that gray aliens are hybrids themselves. I can go into that if you want, but mm-hmm. But the fact is, though, it is a breeding program, and they are breeding hybrids who look mainly alien, mostly alien, somewhat alien, a little bit alien, not so alien at all, really, but still weird. Mm-hmm. And then mainly human. This one really does. This one's human, and then just plain human. Except for mm-hmm. one thing, or hybrids, as I call them, a combination of human and hybrid. Hybrids, to use that word to differentiate itself from all the other hybrids, are the ones who will be living here. And this is what I've uncovered in this last book of mine. It's the ones who are actually living here with abductees' help. Now, on board a UFO, hybrids are, when they're children, they are taught about life on Earth. They're taught about what a playground is, and sometimes they're brought down to a playground like at 3 in the morning, and they have an abductee child with them, and the abductee child shows them how to use a swing, shows them how to go up a ladder and down a slide, shows them how to climb on monkey bars and all that, and that's how children learn that. And children also play with, even when they're younger, they play with abductee children. They have special toys. I once wrote an article about hybrid toys and games, which is one of the more bizarre things I've ever done, because it's such an odd thing to write an entire article about the kinds of games and toys that hybrids have. Who would be? Even now, I marvel at the fact that I even thought about that there was enough information, enough evidence to show that there was these certain kinds of toys that they all played with.
Wonderful.
But anyway, so I published that somewhere. I think.
So they play. So even though they're extraterrestrial hybrids, they have it, like you look at animals. All animals play, like and dogs will play, and they'll even show horses and pigs playing. So you're saying that hybrids like to play. That's a
well. These are human-looking hybrids, right? These are human-looking. They're mainly human. You have to understand that, and they right. And when they get older, they come down to people's houses. Maybe they're age 10 or 11, and an abductee will show them. Now, there's always a caretaker with them. Will show them what the kitchen is like, and explain mm-hmm. what a stove is, and what a sink is, and what a refrigerator is, and I included a lot of anecdotes of that sort where people have these experiences in the book, and one time, for example, this little 10-year-old kid comes in, and he and the woman's showing him the bottom part of the refrigerator and the top part of the refrigerator, which was the freezer. And mm-hmm. she said, "This is where we keep ice cubes and frozen food and all that sort of stuff." So he said, "Well," the little kid said, "Well, I'd like to. Can I have an ice cube? I want to see what an ice cube is. Can I have something like that?" And she says, "No. If I give it to you, it's really, really cold. You won't be able to hold it." "Oh, no. I'll be able to hold it. It's okay." Well, she says, "Well, it'll hurt your hand if I put it in your hand." Mm-hmm. She says, "No, it won't hurt my hand. It won't hurt my hand." So she says, "Okay." So she puts an ice cube in his hand. He holds it there for about 30 seconds, and then he drops it on the floor. It hurt his hand. But he did not know what an ice cube was, had never felt cold like that before until mm-hmm. The point is that what you're looking at is, yes, they can come down when they're young and they can visit an abductee in the abductee's house, but there are 10 trillion other things that they have to learn. When mm-hmm. they start moving in, starting around age 17 or so up to about age 23, 24, They move into apartments. Some, who I call independent hybrids, move in alone. Most of them are in twos or threes, and that might be for protection. I'm not exactly sure. And they have to be taught by abductees everything, especially the independents, who the ones will be sort of the more important ones. They have to be taught everything. They're taught what a red light is and what a green light is. They don't have that on board a UFO, you know. They're taught how to go shopping.
So they don't let them watch television, huh? They can learn all this by just watching our human television.
Well, no, they don't have television on board a UFO. The only time they will see a television is when they come into a person's house and they say, "What's that?" And then the person has to explain, and I have a whole section on that in there, on explaining what a television is. And there's a way in which they ask questions, which is a sort of off-the-wall way of asking questions. I call it a question cascade, or just one after another, one after another, one after another, just in rapid succession. They remember everything. They're very, very smart. But it's a rule-driven society on board the UFO. Everything is a matter of rules. It is sort of like here, too, in a way. But this is really strong rules. So they ask, who gets to watch television? How long can they watch television? How many shows, once they learn that there are shows and channels, how many shows can they watch? In other words, what are the rules for watching television? Because everything is rule-driven on board a UFO.
Have you ever been on a military base? It's the same thing. I mean,
is that right?
Not to that degree, but well, imagine if you were on a spaceship or an aircraft carrier, and you're out to sea or submarine. You're out to sea for months on end. You might not be coming up for air for in a sub for 6 months. So they have very strict rules about everything, because if you have one mistake, you're all dead. So it's not. Yeah, and I've heard that we had a fellow who was talking about the secret mission to planet Serpo, apparently, which is, we listen to all these stories because we're over here doing this, right? And the same thing, the Americans that went on board the ship were just astonished with the amount of rules. They said the same thing. It's a very regimented society. It was almost like Nazi Germany, that type of, what they imagine it was, because they weren't not doing that. But, yeah, so it's kind of logical, but, that's why this is a great place to be, because we so-called have free will. So they're going to come down here and get exposed to free will. And they have to teach
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah, free will is something that they do not have, and it's very difficult to master. You have to learn, and so the book has long segments about how they're learning and how they're doing it, and eventually they learn enough so that they don't have to have the abductee with them all the time, and they just go off on their own. They're assimilated into the society, and then the abductee gets another one, and then that goes on for a year or so, and then they get another one. So
it sounds like a fun job.
Well,
now,
they're
is there any fun in all this? Do humans is this all dark and dreary and scary, or are we having any kind of fun or enjoyment and pleasure with this next phase of human? You said that the grays themselves are hybrids, and we have stories.
That's my guess. That's my guess, and the reason I guess that is because I take a look at these beings, and they're human-shaped, whereas when you look at the insect-like ones, they're not so human-shaped. They look really, really thin. They have heads like praying mantises, and they look really strange. Whereas the gray aliens look sort of human. I mean, they got shoulders, they got they got legs, they got arms. Same thing with the insect-like ones, but they look more human-like, the gray ones. I can grant them that they have to have certain features, eyes, and their eyes are at the top of their head, which is where they should be for all superior animals on Earth have eyes at the top of their head for for danger. Their ears and all their sensory organs are up there as well. It's okay for them to have a nose. Now they have 2 holes for a nose. I'll grant them the nose because if something spills or if there's a bad smell, they have to sort of look around and see what that is for survival's sake, it seems to me. I can grant them ears. If something falls over, they have to be able to hear it and look over and see what happens. A mouth, that's where I get stuck. They do not eat through their mouths. They have no teeth. They have no lips. They have no tongues. They do not eat through their mouth. They do not breathe. Why would you need a mouth? That's what has always bothered me. And now I think that these gray aliens are basically cloned, or they're stamped out of a die or something like that, because with the increase in population, since I was born in 1942, we've had an enormous growth of the world's population. Unbelievable. Right. There were 2.3 billion people on Earth when I was born, and now there's 7.4 billion people on Earth, and that's just in my lifetime. It's staggering.
I know, it's staggering.
Therefore, there has to be more.
Wow. Yeah, go ahead. Continue.
Well, there has to be more because of the population growth, and because it's intergenerational, and the intergenerational aspect of population. That means that there has to be more gray aliens and more UFOs, actually, around to process all the abductees who are being born, but who weren't being born in such great numbers in 1942.
Right.
So the phenomenon not only expands with the population, but it keeps up with it, and it allows for more abductees because there are more people, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, it's extremely well designed. Now, you ask, is this good, bad, or indifferent? Then we move to the clandestine nature of it. They don't want us to know what they're doing. They will do anything to prevent us from knowing what they're doing, even though we do know what they're doing, except that what we know and what the vast majority of humans know are 2 different things. Most humans think that the people who do abduction research are totally crazy. But but the fact is, though, that they don't want us to know what they're doing. If they were benevolent and wonderful and going to heal the earth and heal people and manufacture heels for shoes, I mean, it would be wonderful. It would be great. They would tell us what they were doing, and we welcome them with open arms. But they don't want us to know what they're doing.
You're thinking like a human when you're trying to, what do they call it?
These beings they're logical.
Think of us as chickens and cows, and the cows don't know what we're doing, and the chickens don't know what we're doing, so they might regard us as, just some kind of animal, and it's like trying to talk to the cat. I mean, have you ever talked to your cat? It's really hard to converse with somebody that doesn't have the same intellect. Their brains are fused. They process information telepathically, but some people do know what they're doing. That's the whole other level of context.
I take issue with what you just said. I have 2 cats, and one of them is really smart.
I have one that's really smart, too. But at the end, she just goes, meow.
No,
she knows how to work me. Go ahead.
We are intelligent. We have native intelligence. We have logic. We can understand what they're doing. With enough information, we can understand anything. I can't, but there are people who are smarter than I am who can. And we can't think of ourselves as part of as just another animal. We have to think of ourselves as human beings who have the intelligence to understand almost anything. But these beings are not benevolent. They are going about a procedure that they've been doing for years and years and years. They are many abductees have their lives ruined because of this. I won't even go into all the disasters that have happened with abductees talking with their husbands or whatever, and what can happen because of that. And every single person who I've ever worked with has had only one thing they wanted to do, which was stop the abductions. Find out a way to stop it, and we can't do that, unfortunately. But I must say that I've worked with people who are medical doctors who are abductees, and psychiatrists who are abductees, and psychologists who are abductees, and university professors who are abductees, and attorneys who are abductees, and so forth and so on, engineers, and et cetera, and people who didn't attend school and never could hold a job, and everybody in the middle, and all the rest of that stuff.
Well, we're working with a class of, okay, so here's what's going on. We're working with a class of conscious, they call it experiencers. So we're going to be politically correct and call them experiencers because they realize that they're in an agreement. And so there's a whole category of those. Then we have the whistleblowers, and we have people that have been in the secret space program. And then there's, have you ever read the book Arrow? It's about Alien Interview by Lawrence Spencer, and it's about the interview with Errol the Gray. And then we have Project Serpo. Okay, so in Project Serpo, the attitude of the Gray, just to promote, set aside your research, the attitude of the Grays was no one owns their DNA. The DNA belongs to the cosmos, and that it's just there for everybody to do whatever they want. So they were baffled when the human stuff, one of their people died, and the Grays just started taking their body and using their DNA. And the crew members were going, but wait, we have to do a ritual, pray over it. And so they were baffled. Okay, Errol the Gray does that, kind of the same thing. She says that these bodies that they have where they come down into Earth sometimes are avatars, just like the movie Avatar. So there was somebody talking about kicking the Gray or even killing a Gray. I've heard stories about that. It's like, well, it's not a big deal. We don't really die. It's just it's just an avatar form that we assume to come down here and do these experiments. But they have different attitudes in that book, and I invite you to read it, and they have a YouTube series that, they were here, of course, for their own agenda, but they were also here to help humanity. And so you hear these stories, and then, so I don't know. I think you have to cast a wider net to get beyond the sample group of what you've had, which is like a couple thousand people, when there are millions and millions and millions of experiencers. And so Karen and I are in these experiencer groups, and we're working with Mary Rodwell and all these people that are getting the global data and expanding our web, and there's a different outcome than one researcher, and that's all. I just invite you. Whether you do it or not, it's up to you, but I just invite you, okay?
Well, it's not one researcher. It's a whole group of researchers as well. That's Yvonne Smith in Los Angeles. It's Jed Turnbull in New York. It's, of course, Bud Hopkins
yes.
and others, Carla Turner, and it all came up basically with the same thing. So you have to look at people who are doing this almost professionally, in a sense. And I've only been doing it for 30 years. So, but the thing is that
Yvonne's getting different outcome now. That I talked about.
I see.
So, yeah, they're getting, it's changed. Something has changed. So
I'll be appearing at something called Contact in the Desert in the first week in June, and I'm doing one of my intensive workshops on what can be believed in abduction narratives and abduction accounts, and I'll be talking in large part about what is reliable and what is not, and I'm going to say things that are now going to upset everybody and all your listeners. Conscious memories are notoriously unreliable when it comes to abductions. Notorious. Worst. That's where the worst confabulation takes place, in conscious memories. And people have told me that X, Y, and Z has happened to them, and this, and that, and that, and this. And I've learned to say, that's very interesting. Well, let's just see what it was, and we'll do a session on whatever they remember. And 9 times out of 10, or maybe 10 times out of 10, it turns out to be very different than what they thought it was. And to their puzzlement. And I ask questions that are logical and chronological. I only ask questions in the beginning, especially. Now later on, when we've had 20 sessions, it changes considerably. But in the beginning, I only ask questions about what they tell me. So if they're lying in bed and they see a light coming into the room, and they think somebody's in the room, that's what I can talk about. I can ask them questions about the light. I can ask them questions about the somebody in the room. And if they go towards the window or if they get out of bed, I can first ask them questions as to why they woke up. That's my first question. What woke you up? If you're laying there asleep and suddenly you wake up and somebody is there, what did it? But if you ask logical questions and you understand the role of confabulation and you understand the role that confabulation plays in conscious memories in the first session, the second session, and the third session, you will do well. If you don't understand that, you tend to, as I did in the very beginning when I started doing this research, I began to believe as sort of everything that people were saying, and I was led astray drastically. The very first, I've told this story many times, but it was a good lesson. The very, very first person in the very first session that I ever worked with gave me a gift. And what she told me was she had a series of different events, and she was going to, we were going to look at an event that happened when she was 7 years old, which is something that I would not do today for a first session. And she was in a park, and she bent down to look at a buttercup, and she felt arms around her, and she was lifted up into a UFO, and that's all she remembered. So we did a session on that, and she was in the park, and I had a little tape recorder that I put next to her to capture everything she said and all that. And she was in the park, and she felt these arms, and as she was going up, she recognized the person who had lifted her up, and it was a guy with an alien with a page boy haircut. I said, okay. And then and his name was Cosmo. Okay. So then I said, this is me answering her. Okay. I mean, okay, I'm going along. Okay. I've never, my very first regression session. And so then he takes her into a room, he takes her clothes off and puts her on a table, he does this, that, and there's a reproductive procedure that he's interested in, a reproductive examination, rather, and she's very embarrassed to tell me about it, even though she's only 7 years old, and then he takes her off the table, and they walk down a hallway, and she sees a gray alien, and when she puts her hands on the gray alien's head, there's love and affection and warmth that emanates from him. And then when she takes her hands off the gray alien's head, the feeling is gone. They continue to walk down the hallway, and they go into another room, and there's a council of grays sitting there at a table, and she sits on a little ledge by the wall, and they tell her that when she grows up to be an adult, she's going to be strong and brave and smart and beautiful, and she's going to have a wonderful life or something like that. And then the Cosmo grabs her and takes her down through the hallway, puts her clothes back on, and takes her back down to the park where she was at. And we talked about it a little bit, and then she left, and then I was overjoyed with amazement. I had done a hypnosis with an abductee onto my unbelievable brain. It was just like, I was just over the moon with amazement. And I called up Bud Hopkins, and we exchanged information, and I asked him if he ever heard this or that and all that sort of stuff. And then that night, I went up to transcribe everything onto what I thought was a superb piece of equipment, a dual floppy Zenith computer, where one large floppy disk had the program in it, and the other large floppy disk was where your data was.
I remember those.
Right. And I thought that my tape recorder would pick up every word she whispered. And it picked up everything I said and nothing that she said at all, and I was just devastated.
Right.
I broke into a cold sweat. I thought, my God, I've lost this amazing event. I lost it. Oh my God. Well, she came back for another session. And a couple of months later, I said, Melissa, remember that very first session we did? She said, yeah. I said, well, I had a little trouble with the tape recorder. Could we do that one again? She said, sure. So she's in the park, and she's bending over looking at a buttercup, and a guy comes down, grabs her around the waist, and pulls her up, and they go up into this UFO, and he's got a page boy haircut, and his name is Cosmo, and he takes her clothes off, and he puts her on the table, and he goes, this and that, and this and that, and there's reproductive examination he's very embarrassed to tell me about, and he puts her clothes back on and brings her back to the park. So he put her clothes back on, brought her back to the park. I said, well, Melissa, remember you said you walked down a hallway and you put your hands on this gray alien's head? And she said, no, I don't remember that happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, remember you went into the room with the council and you were gonna be loyal, brave, courageous, and true? She said, I think that happened to my friend Lydia, not to me. And I knew right then and there that I was an idiot. I did not know what I was doing.
No, you're not an idiot.
I was.
My husband is a psychotherapist who's worked with thousands and thousands of people, and he does psychotherapy. He does purposely regressions on all kinds of people, from addiction to whatever. It's just the human condition.
It was confabulation.
Vampires. One person thought he had vampires that sucked on his throat, and then when he finally got down, it was his tonsils being removed in the hospital. These are screen memories. We will never know the true nature of reality.
No,
Our world has been polluted with all this information now, and it is really hard to get it objective about what's really going on. However, doesn't matter, because we're co-creating this whole existence in the first place. And it's a chicken and the egg phenomenon. So the more you do psychotherapy, or the more you do regressions, the more you're going to encounter this phenomenon, and you just throw your hands up and go, well, what is real? What isn't real? And you can
that's not the way it works. That is not the way it works. No.
Well, I have my opinion.
Not on the abduction phenomenon. This is confabulation. And you have to put in controls for it. And once you put in controls, the confabulation begins to decline. It happens most in the first session. It happens most in conscious memories. And it happens in the first session most, and then second session less, and then third session even less. By the fourth session that I have with people, they are aware of confabulation, and they're extremely careful as to what to tell me. They tell me things that are outrageous, but things that other people have told me too by the hundreds, and therefore I know that this is part of the deal. So there is a way of we're not at the mercy of people who are just remembering it. There is a system here so that we can understand what is going on. They do this at the Michael Newton Institute when they're doing life between lives regression. So this is the whole phenomenon of doing regressions, is getting down to the core essence. And so anyway, but there's always the potential of leading the witness as a therapist, and you have to. So even the process of asking questions directs them where you want them to go. So one of the things that we do, like in holotropic breathwork and other types of systems, is it's very undirected. Just, get them going and then back off and allow what emerges. And that gets you to a whole other level, and allow them to go deeper into the different levels. And then they get the story that way. And those things, they've done 40,000 regressions in the Life Between Life Institute, and they're getting a greater accuracy. Anyway, it'd be great if we could all put our, these sessions in a common database, and then let the computer can chunk it around the globe and see what we come up with. And so, getting pure and unaltered or undirected statistics and results is very difficult to do. And I know you're doing the best you can, and I know you think you're getting whatever, and it is to a degree. However, the best thing is undirected, and just let people go into their psyche and really retrieve the information in a deep state of space. I just don't agree with you. It just doesn't. That is not the way the abduction phenomenon works. That's just I cannot agree with that. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry for you to say it to your listeners too. But the abduction phenomenon.
I don't care. We're allowed to have different opinions.
No, this is totally different.
We're different people. Well, Karen wants to ask you something, so she's over there. I can see her hand going up. Go ahead, Karen. What did you want to ask?
Well, I haven't. I've been just listening. I've learned a lot, actually, listening. So, I'm not a person who's done regressions. I've not even had a regression. I just have what are experiences that I've been have experiences I'm scratching my head about, right? I have had one abduction experience where I was literally told I was going to be abducted. I haven't recalled any. I had one day that I woke up really groggy, and I had like scoop mark type of things on my body. And what was interesting about them is if I laid straight down on my back with my arms at my side, it looked like someone had done them with their right hand, all the same angle, which if you got cuts on your body, they wouldn't exactly be at the same angle. So I drew a picture of myself, sort of a little sketch of myself, and then made the marks just to kind of look at it. I think I posted them somewhere, but that was just to get it in my head. Hey, wait a minute, what's this? I'm looking at, I'm finding all these marks. What the heck is it? The second time that it wasn't too much longer after that, I was literally had a telepathic contact telling me that they were going to abduct me. They gave me a heads up, so to speak. And I had an experience where I was with my husband at the time, and I was in a bed. I sort of woke up in a tray, like a metal tray, almost like an autopsy tray. That was exactly the same dimensions as the bed, and there were. I knew that there was some beings around me, but I couldn't see them. But at the foot of the bed, I saw two reptilian-type beings. And the strange thing was, my husband remarked that he'd had a dream that there was an alien at the foot of the bed the same night. And so I had a whole scenario of what that was about. But then that sort of stimulated my thinking about some odd pregnancy issues that I had. I had a pregnancy that were basically, I believed I was pregnant, but my doctor disagreed. But I believe I had a miscarriage, but I only passed, the afterbirth type part of the birth. And I always felt like that baby was still alive somewhere. I mean, I've never felt like it was deceased. And when I had 3 children afterwards, I would get all my kids, doing activity, and I always look for the fourth one. Like, is this one going? This one's coloring. This one's doing his project, and then the other one, and then the fourth. Wait, where'd the fourth one go? It happens to me a lot. And I even had a name pop in my head, Benjamin. It was a boy, and it was named Benjamin. So, I just had these experiences, and I'm in the position of being the person trying to figure it out. And I don't want to personally get myself into confabulation because, it's hard enough to admit that I'm having these experiences really, really difficult in my belief systems that I had from before. It was literally the experiences that changed my belief systems to look beyond my religious upbringing as to what was going on. So I know from my experiencer's point of view, we're already in a deficit position of everyone thinks we're crazy, right? To where we're having our own self-doubt, to where, our own minds are capable of faking us out. And Reverend John Polk is one of our co-hosts here on Aquarian Radio, calls that forgetfulness thing alien anesthesia. So we've already been zapped with alien anesthesia during the experience. And so, from the experiencer's point of view, if we're not in a position, if we're just kind of sorting our own thing out, we're not yet exactly had access to regression therapy. I mean, I think what we mostly want to know is, is this real? Is this really happening to me? And then you do directly get into the why of it. I think that being having the reproductive experience, I've really wondered about the why of it. And then now you're mentioning the multi-generational thing, and we have a lot of miscarriages in the family line. They're odd, they're strange. And then, but we're tight-lipped. We're not talking about it. So I can't ask, unless I ask in spirit, I can't ask older relatives what their experiences were. But I'm wondering, that to me speaks of not just the breeding program, but they're looking at certain bloodlines, certain DNA capacity. They want certain traits, of certain family traits. My family is Irish, probably came from the Druidic, very psychic, very sensitive, empathic people, generally speaking. So if you're coming from an point of view, I mean, how do you sort of sort out your own experiences if you don't have access necessarily to professional services? What would you suggest?
Well, you can't really do it, unfortunately, because most people who think that they might be abductees if they tell it to anybody outside of their own family, they could easily lose their jobs and be thought to be crazy. And even if they tell it to their family, the family wants them to go see a psychiatrist or whatever, and because that's a normal, loving concern for them, and they're trying to help. But being an abductee, and I'm not saying that you are, because I don't know all the situation, but for other people, being an abductee is something that I have to tell them that they have to, be very careful about who they talk to about this and all that, because it can lead to marital discord, it can lead to job loss, it can lead to ridicule. Most people who are abductees don't want to be abductees. They just want to lead a normal life, and my job when they come to me is to get them to lead a normal life. The ones who I see oftentimes are really desperate to find out what's going on there, and a lot of them will stay up at night with a gun under their pillow, hoping that the aliens don't come down to get them that night or something. And I try to get their lives back in order, and so they get sick and tired of talking about it, and they get sick and tired of doing regressions, and they just want to go on with their lives, and that's fine with me. And in all the years I've done this, I've never accepted money from anybody for doing it, and anybody can come as many times as they want, or stop as many times as they want, or stop whenever they want, rather. But the whole phenomenon is very, very difficult for most people. It's difficult to talk about. It's difficult to be involved with, and it takes their time away from their lives and all sorts of other things. And virtually all the people who I've worked with for more than once want this phenomenon to stop, and they want me to try to get it to stop in some way. And I can't do that, unfortunately. The only thing I can do is get them to not worry about it so much anymore and get on with their lives, even though they know it's going to continue to happen. And if I can reach that point, I think I've won a victory.
Oh, I can understand that. That seems real reasonable. Just hang on a second. I have Janet, back to you. I had a distraction.
Okay. So what I wanted to know, we're getting towards the last 10, 15 minutes of the show. Where's my mic? Here's my mic. I lost my mic. 2 questions. Are you only dealing with one species or one variation of gray? Are you getting the tall ones, the short ones, and or other? Are you getting mantis or reptilians in your findings? And also, why are they doing this? Are you getting the main reason for this hybrid program? Are they taking over the Earth? Are they going to kill off all the regular humans? Or what are your findings on those 2 questions? What species and why?
First of all, all the people I've talked with have described certain aliens. They describe the insect-like ones, who I call insectolins. They describe the reptilian-like ones. Once in a while, it's unusual, but every once in a while they'll say this one looks reptilian. Whereas if you go on the internet, it's here reptile, there reptile, everywhere, or reptile. And it's unfortunately, but they do exist, and there's a reason why they exist as well. Then there's gray aliens, tall and small, and then there's hybrids, and then there's abductees at the end. They're all part of a workforce. It's one long workforce. The insect-like ones are the ones who are the leaders. They call the shots. They give orders. Everybody else takes orders. They all are bred for whatever they do. They were created, the gray aliens were created to do the work they do. The hybrids are created to do certain work. Their brains are altered in such a way to do that. That's what they do, and that's all they do, essentially. So what you've got is a very cohesive workforce around the world that is processing abductees who are unwilling parts of the workforce because they help to instruct hybrids and all that. And they also give their genetics to the program, so to speak. But it's a cohesive workforce around the world. It's a global phenomenon. Everybody says the same thing. I cannot emphasize that enough. And the question is, what for? We do not know what for. The question, I asked several questions in the last chapter of my latest book, and that is, are we the first planet ever to be hybridized, in essence?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is that's not possible. Absolutely impossible. It's not possible. No, that can't be. These beings know exactly what they're doing. They do it in a routine way. In the beginning, when they started, there would be major errors made if this was the first time that well, I shouldn't even say that. That's a different question. But the fact is, though, that this looks like a routine phenomenon. The second is, are these beings? Is this the first time these beings have ever done it, as opposed to our being the first planet to have it done to? And the answer is that is not possible. Also, they've done this over and over and over again. And every one of the ones on board has this function. Everything is laid out carefully, and they are extremely well versed at what they do. We see we see abductees coming forward who remember things because they can't be perfect. And UFOs are seen. That's a mistake. They can't be perfect either, even just seeing UFOs. But it cannot be possible that this is the first time that they've ever done these. There's a whole set of reasons as to why this is not possible. And there's the question is, what are they after? What is this all about? Well, this is a clandestine global intergenerational phenomenon. It can only mean one thing, and that is planetary acquisition. They will be taking over, because the difference between hybrids and us is neurological. They can control humans, make us think anything they want us to think, make us do anything they want us to do, make us see anything they want us to see, at their will, at their whim. And we cannot do that to them. This is a not good situation. I wish it was. I wish that it was all sweetness and light. I wish that was all true. That is not what abductees have told me. I've told my colleague Bud Hopkins, who, or any of the other abduction researchers who are serious researchers around. I wish it was not true. I wish I could go with how beautiful and wonderful, and they're going to heal the earth and heal me and heal everybody. That would be great. But it's not what people tell me. That's all I can say. It's not what people tell me. Therefore, this adds up to our being a second-class species and them being a first-class species. That is something that is inconceivable to humans. It's inconceivable to me, practically, except I've been at this for so long. But that appears to be what it is. Now, I don't like to hear this. I'm afraid of this subject. When I first started doing this work, I was happy and filled with wonder and amazement. I thought, this is contact between two different civilizations. It's just wonderful. Oh my God, this is the most important thing that's ever happened, and we're going to be a member of the larger community, and on and on. And the more I did this research, the less I began to believe in that, as people were telling me what had happened to them. And eventually, I began to be fearful of this subject, and now I don't think that my two sons are going to lead the life that they thought they were going to lead when they get older. I'm old already, so it doesn't matter for me. But I fear for this now. And I just don't like it. These are superior thinking beings.
Let me invite you into another perspective based on, our research and the other people that we talk to, because we look at the whole field. The hybridization program has been going on this planet for millions of years, probably, and it seems to be a galactic phenomenon. Like you said, this isn't the first time they're doing it. There's a lot of evidence that there was these beings called the Anunnaki came in and did a level of hybridization, and that these grays they're on ancient depictions. The grays have been seen in antiquity, little grays. I can give you a lot of examples of the pictures off the internet. So they're fighting these things. They've been around for a long time. Part of the theory is that they might be androids, they might be humanoid. They're not even sure. They are worker race. They tend to be worker bees. And, this program's been going on. So even in our conversation, it's been going on at least 100 years, and there's indications it might even go back and forth then. And so they're doing it. And we never know who we're talking to. A lot of hybrids don't even know they're hybrids, and they find out later they're hybrids. We're doing DNA analysis, and people are finding things within there. And so maybe, you already are a hybrid. There's a number of my friends that are going, oh, my goodness, I found out, and the government's aware of this. So is the government in on it? I don't know. But there's apparently some kind of cooperation with, not the regular government, but, the secret government. And, there are my labs, there are other abductions besides the gray abductions. There's those ones involving the U.S. military. So maybe it's just what is. I don't like it. We can't control it. It's probably been going on all along. We may be a hybrid. They're sending them down, and they look like humans. You might be marrying them. You might be having children with them and be able to reproduce through copulation rather than the cloning process. And is our world horrible? Yeah. The workers, yeah, I think human beings are primarily bred as workers. What do we do? We're shamed if we don't work and have a job, then we're bad human beings. So we have societal controls as well as, religious controls and everything else. I wanted to give Karen one last chance. We have like 10 minutes. But just putting it out on the table, I agree. I don't think there's much we can do about it except for talking about it on the radio shows. Is this going to help? Or are we going to have somebody come forth and say, yes, I know about this? Yeah, we are getting whistleblowers coming forward. What do we believe? What do we have to throw away? I have no idea. I think that each person has to kind of decide that for themselves, because it doesn't matter what we believe. If it's going on and we can't do anything about it, all we can do to learn is perhaps accept it, or, like you do. You say to your people, get more comfortable with it, and maybe somebody will come forth and we can actually do something about it. Karen, I want to invite you to say something. Are you back?
Yeah, sure, yes. No, it's just been very, very informative discussion. I still feel like, I guess what I feel is like this. I was in another life situation where, I'll just say it straight up. I was involved in a domestic violence relationship, and for a long time we didn't have a voice to talk about, or just the same as what goes on with abduction victims or abductees or experiencers, however you want to put that, is that it was a shame to even talk about it. You could lose your job if the person, they thought your perp was going to come, harass you, or if they did harass you. I mean, we had these groups of people with various stigma, attached to it. And yeah, I would love to have my life normal under that circumstance as well. But in the end, you have this experience. And, even if parts of it are, you've got, what you might think false memories or shield memories or screen memories, you're still stuck with it. It's that, I don't know, I have a different feeling other than just trying to scoop it under the rug and try and live a normal life as possible. I don't know how you really do that when you've had your eyes open to a lot of things you didn't see before. To me, finding a way to humanly integrate the information. And if this is, a negative situation, then there's nothing we can do about it, or if it's some kind of, ET takeover, so it's just going to happen and we're not going to know about it, we're still in a situation of a profound human experience any way you slice the bread. So the way I feel about it is that, it'd be my hope, or how I handle it, I'll just say it straight up just for me, is I want to delve into it. I want to understand it more, because I've already suffered, stigma from other situations. I have a life situation where I don't have to worry about a job situation because I'm in what they call the precariat world, and I'm in the low-income world where I'm not going to, how much lower can I go? I don't know if I really want to say that. But, yeah, some people are already washing out into that space just because of the economic trauma that's going on right now. But the thing is it's still your human experience. It's still, to me, paranormal is still part of your normal. And I just have a different feeling to delve into it for myself, see what other people have said about it, see what other experiencers have said about it, because I have a profound personal need to know and to find some kind of peace with it one way or the other. I had the choice earlier in life to take a negative view. My father was a believer in the communist conspiracies. I grew up in a somewhat negative environment, and I had to make choices to be positive anyway and to be hopeful for myself, hopeful for my children, and I have a grandson too, and I don't want to think, and maybe it's braver to think, that the reality of it. I can understand that. It's just that I don't know. I just think just putting it aside and under the rug, it would not be my choice. It hasn't been my choice. For me to look at it, take the consequences of talking about it, because as I've shared my own experiences, other people have shared theirs, and it's been a personal journey, not just that thing that happened one day, So I'm just saying that, but I do respect the very large body of work that's been done here by Blake Hopkins and yourself and other researchers, because that is part of the discovery process. It's finding out what have all these other experiences said over a long period of time. That's a very important perspective. So I really thank you for that, and that you've done all this work of, getting that information out and your years of research. So I appreciate what you're saying. It's been very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it also. This has turned out to be my life's work, oddly enough. I never would have imagined this beforehand, but it's worthwhile, even though the negatives are extremely high when you do this kind of research. People think that you yourself are crazy, or you're soft in the head, or whatever it is. And it did not do a whole lot of good for my academic career. I'll say that. There's a certain amount of abuse you have to take one way or the other when you do this kind of research. But I think that it's important, and that it's got to be done by somebody, so it might as well be me.
So we have 4 minutes left, and I want to give it to you, Dr. Jacobs. Please tell us what you're going to be doing at Contact in the Desert, because I'm going there. I'll see you there.
Oh, okay. I'm giving a 2-hour lecture, whatever it is, and then I'm giving an intensive workshop on hybrids. A workshop on hybrids and an intensive workshop on what we can believe in abduction accounts, where I will talk for 2 hours or so, is it 2 hours or 3 hours? I can't remember what. About abduction. How do you separate the wheat from the chaff in abduction accounts? And that will be an interesting one, because, or else extremely boring. One of the two. I don't know how many people are going to sign up for that, but that's what I'm going to do.
That sounds great. And your books and website.
Well,
how do people contact you?
Secret Life, The Threat, and Walking Among Us are all still available on Amazon.com. And I have a website called the UFO Abduction, singular.com. And the reason I say singular, the UFO Abduction, because in the first printing of Walking Among Us, they put an S on the end of that, UFO Abductions.com, and that's a whole different world. That's not my website. So it's the UFOabduction.com, and they can look at things that have been there. Now, I haven't really upgraded that website for about 1,000 years, so you'll take it. It's an old-fashioned website that I have to have somebody help me with, because I can't do that kind of stuff. But so anyway, that's what I'll be doing at the contact. From what I've heard, I'll also be sweating a lot.
Me too, yes. No air conditioning in the desert. Take a lot of water, yes.
That's what I've heard,
well,
yep.
Thank you. Yes. I was there before. Is this your first year at Contact in the Desert?
Yeah, I've done a bunch of other UFO conferences, but I've never been a Contact in the Desert.
Well, it's a wonderful experience, and there's going to be a couple thousand people there, I heard, so I invite everybody to come. Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Jacobs, David. It's been phenomenal. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you don't mind butting heads with me. We all have our own opinions. But, that makes an interesting dialogue for our listeners, and I really do respect your research. And
well, if you're at Contact in the Desert, come up to me and introduce yourself and remind me about the show because I have no memory left whatsoever.
All right, I will do so. I will remind you. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to take this time and play our commercial for Contact in the Desert. Thank you very much for sponsoring us, and much love and blessing, and aloha. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Contact in the Desert. Come discover why USA Today crowned it the Woodstock of UFOs. Contact in the Desert explores ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial life, human origins, crop circles, anti-gravity machines, contact experiences, and the increasingly urgent need for public disclosure. Everything you need to know to attend is found at contactinthedesert.com. Speakers will be offering 4 full days of lectures, workshops, intensives, and tours in a beautiful desert setting that is world-renowned for UFO sightings as well as contact experiences. Don't miss this event. Check out contactinthedesert.com to find out all about this unique opportunity. Don't let anyone tell you what to believe. Come and experience it for yourself.
Progressive presents Get Pumped. Inspiration to help you do insurance stuff.
Okay, time out. You're gonna let your budget be the boss of you? Take control with Progressive's Name Your Price tool. Tell us what you want to pay for car insurance, and we'll help you find options that fit your budget. Here's some music to get you pumped. Da-dong, 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 dang, dang. I hear your budget laughing at you. Oh, wait, that's just those kids laughing at me. Ignore them! Da-dong, da-dong,
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.